All right, so yes, thank you, Rahul, for introducing the topic. I think it was a fun conversation. I'm sorry getting blinded. My topic is what the fuck is UI, sorry, what the F is UI UX? Um, uh, so hello, Ahmedabad, this is me. That's my family there. On the far right, we're currently based in Hyderabad, my adopted city, but I cannot talk about Hyderabad without talking about Bombay, the city I come from, and I miss the sea. Um, since we're talking titles today, I started as a web consultant way back in 1999. I like to think of it as the pre-Google days. Um, my next title was information architect, and I was a practicing information architect and consultant from 2003 to 2011. I worked at an IT services company called Emphasis. I consulted with a lot of BFSI companies, Citibank, JP Morgan, AIG, a lot of that. In 2011, I took up a role as head of product experience center of excellence with TCS Products, Tata's consultancy services. They were getting into products. They had a lot of IP which they were converting into products. So I set up and I led a team of product experience designers there. In 2017, I stepped away from like a managerial position back into being an interaction designer. This was in Microsoft in 2017. And that's when I learned that there can be a dedicated design research role, and I loved it. So I worked as a design researcher starting 2018, within a year. Became a design research manager, whatever. But then I realized that this sort of bifurcation of roles is not for me. I needed something which could combine both of them together again. So this is what I do now. I lead design and research at Microsoft, and in a lot of these product companies, just to give you a little bit of context, right? Design research is often separate from experience design. So there are different teams, they report into different people, and at some point, you know, it converges at like one of the very high, at a partner level or CXO level. But what happens then is design is thinking about design, research is thinking about research, and no one is thinking about the product. So I asked for a role where I could do both. Luckily, I found someone who was willing to take a bet on me, and this is what I am now. I lead a small design and research team at Enterprise Commerce. Enterprise Commerce is basically the commerce engine of Microsoft. So all the, you know, if you follow the quarterly results and things like that, right? The trillions of dollars of business that Microsoft does, each and every penny from that passes through the products that we're modernizing. And if they don't work for like a minute, it's like loss of billions of dollars, and it comes in newspapers. So these are the three things that I'm going to cover today, right? What does UI UX even mean? Humans are more than users, and then creating impact via design. So the first time I heard this term, UI UX, was I think a few years ago, a little before COVID, when I was at a conference and someone came up to me and they said that, ma'am, we're looking at a career in UI UX, and I was like, what is this? I didn't know what it meant, right? And then the term sort of, you know, kept getting more and more and more prolific. But there's a lot of thing in the community where actually a lot of us don't understand what is UI UX, right? So let's take a little step back and think about it, right? So there have been multiple waves and phases in which the industry has progressed, right? So you had Industry 1.0, which was really about the industrial revolution just starting out, 2.0 with mass production. Then you had 3.0, which many people of my generation have been privy to, where there's automation, computers, electronics, all of that, right? And now we are living in yet another wave, which is the Industry 4.0. And as the World Economic Forum says, that there are advances that are merging the physical, digital, and biological world. The speed, the breadth of changes is really forcing us to think how society develops, country develops, and even what it means to be human, right? The last highlighted sentence there really, it is an opportunity to help everyone, including leaders, policymakers, and people from all income groups and nations, to harness converging technologies in order to create an inclusive and human-centered future. So congratulations to everybody in the room, because you guys are going to make a difference here. So, this term, right, UI, UX, getting very prolific, you run like a Google search, you get a bunch of these things. In the last 2 days, I've had a lot of people. My Spock, the first time we met, she was like, hi, I'm a UI, UX designer. I said, don't say that. Why? Because just think about it, right? Where does this term come from? How many people are familiar with this? Okay, it's heartening to see a few hands. So this is Jesse James Garrett's Elements of User Experience, one of the very fundamental sort of thing, right, that has given shape to the space. And you can see that the way he thinks about user experience starts from the abstract to the concrete, where we first start by thinking about the needs of the people, right? Then we think about the functional specs, content requirements. Then there's a layer of interaction design. Then there's a layer of information design. And on top of that is the visual design or the aesthetics. This really, my friends, is UI, right? And UI is an element of the elements that make user experience, right? So when you say, I am UI, UX, what are you really trying to say? Because you are a user experience designer, you should understand UI, you should know UI, there's no need to call it out separately. So introduce yourselves as experience designers. User experience designers, we'll come to it in a bit. Yeah. So you must be all, I'm hoping, familiar be this process some way or the other. There are multiple versions of this, but essentially this is what user experience design is all about, right? Starts from discovery, where we think about understanding needs of the people that we are designing for, to defining, where there would be like a divergence of needs, but you converge on a few set of goals. Then you develop solutions and you deliver, right? If we think about the UI UX paradigm, what do you think this is? This image on the right-hand side. Anybody? Come on, it's not so hard. It's a chef, yeah? Would you introduce a chef as a cutter and fryer of vegetables? Or you would say, I'm like, no, no? So what is a chef doing? Is he like just cutting and frying? No. Thinking about like the needs of the user, right? Then going ahead to create that thing and then presenting that entire thing is a part of what chef does or what the chef brings to the table. Just the way for experience designers. So if there's probably one takeaway from this discussion today, I hope at least some of you will stop introducing yourselves as UI UX, right? There's one exception to it. So now that you know the rule, know when to break the rule, right? So there could be some of you who really, really want to work only on the GUI, the graphical user interface, right? So if you're someone who enjoys working on typography, colors, illustrations, fonts, like really the UI layer, then probably call yourself a graphic designer or a visual designer, right? But if you're designing the core of what the experience of the product is, you are an experience designer. This should be obvious, right? Unfortunately, it's not, and I'll tell you why. So let me actually first play this for you.
Hi, I'm Angie Lee, and I'm here at the UX conference in San Francisco. I got to ask Don Norman what he thinks about the term UX.
Once upon a time, a very long time ago, I was at Apple. And we said the experience of using these computers is weak. The experience, when you first discover it, when you see it in the store, when you buy it, when you, can't fit it into the car. It's in this great big box. It doesn't fit into the car. And when you finally do get it home, opening the box up and, it looks scary. I don't know if I dare put this computer together. All of that is user experience. It's everything that touches upon your experience with the product, and it may not even be near the product. It may be when you're telling somebody else about it. That's what we meant when we devised the term user experience and set up what we called the User Experience Architect's Office at Apple to try to enhance things. Now, Apple was already pretty good, so we were starting with a good product, making it even better. Today, that term has been horribly misused. It's used by people to say, I'm a user experience designer. I design websites or I design apps. And they have no clues to what they're doing. And they think the experience is that simple device, the website or the app or who knows what. No, it's everything. It's the way you experience the world. It's the way you experience your life. It's the way you experience the service. Or, an app or a computer system. But it's a system, it's everything. Got it?
So that's straight from the person who invented the term user experience, and he talks about how this is being horribly misused because we are thinking about it in a very narrow sense, right? A website or an app is not user experience. The secret really lies in the word user. Oh, sorry.
Hi.
So experiences, right? When we say we design experiences, what are we doing? Experience is a byproduct of a human interacting with technology in the sense of the digital experiences that we are talking about, right? People have lives outside of the product, right? Doing all kinds of things, some of which can overlap with the product that they're using at that point, and some of the things which are not related to that. So you may design a beautiful product, but if it doesn't fit what is top of mind for the person, then the interaction or the experience is not necessarily going to be great. And for this, you need to know the context. You cannot really think of designing experiences without understanding the concept. So this is from contextual design by Holzblatt and Bayer. There are, I'm sure, many other models there. But something that I use in my work is these 5 sort of models, right, of context that Holzblatt and Bayer talk about, which is what is the cultural model, what is the cultural context of the user, what is the collaboration context, because work doesn't happen in isolation. You're exchanging information, there are people upstream, you're collaborating, downstream. What are your relationships with the various stakeholders? What is the sequence of the event? And then what is the sensation, or what is it that you're trying to convey? We typically call that as the voice and tone of products, right? So it's the sum total of all of this really, which constitutes your context. Now, imagine you're designing an online application for booking a train ticket, right? Just top of head, tell me, if you guys were to design it, right? What kind of features would you design in it? Just top of your mind. I'd love for people to just, it's a train ticket online, say train ticket booking application. Yes? Which class, right? Which compartment? Awesome.
Would include if they are disabled or if they are not okay.
Awesome. So you'll design for inclusivity. What else? Obviously. Anything else? The date. What else? Seat preference, maybe food preference also, right? What else? Temperature control, maybe. Yeah? Payment method, right? So you'll put all of this together. You'll design your train application. Now, let's throw context in the mix, right? Everybody knows this? The famous last scene of DDLJ? I'll play it for those who don't. Imagine now, you're designing a train application for Simran. Now, how will you design it? Tell me. Would it be the same thing? Yeah, go. Okay. Okay, reminder capability. What else? She is running away from home. She has time for instructions. Yeah, like how does she get that done in like 5 seconds, probably just before she starts running, right? So the paradigm of how you would design that would be very different from us sitting in a room thinking about this hypothetical end user and thinking about how to design a train application for them. So now you see, understanding the context opens up so many more possibilities of how you could approach a particular problem. Oh, sorry. So this is another representation of how you might think about designing. And this is something that we use a lot in the work that we do at Microsoft. So in fact, the hypothesis progression framework came out of Microsoft. There were a couple of researchers, Travis Lodermilk and Jessica Rich, who came up with it. So there is build, measure, learn, formulate, hypothesis, experiment, sense making, which is typically the foundation of iterative design. But what is interesting is that you do it at every stage of the problem, right from customers. So we just hypothesized, right, about this train customer, but then we had a live case of a person who's rushing to catch the train at the last minute when her father says, "Ja, Simran, ja," right? So sometimes we need to also validate and understand the needs of our customer. Stage 2 is doing the same for the problem. Are we solving the right problem? Are we building the right thing before we decide that we need to build it right? And as designers, we are very much accountable for that as well. And then comes your concept and features. But you know what happens? We don't ask enough questions at first, and we concentrate all our energies on the concepts and features. Yeah? So this is a little bit blurred. I'll read it out for you. But as an experienced designer, this is what I ask myself, right? How might I design my products such that the human interacting with my product, and I think some of you did the how might we exercise with honey the other day. So how might I help the humans who are going to use my products experience a slightly better day, a slightly better life, a more equitable world, a world where technology becomes invisible, right? Because when technology becomes invisible, the humans can do their work. I design for people, but there cannot be people without planet, right? So the shift of how we think about, you see how this is going? We started with users, and we said that users is in the context of a product. But then We said we need to think about people as a broader term because people have context, they have life outside of products, and that can be where innovation comes from. But then we are now talking about life-centered design because sometimes people do things that are harmful to the planet, and that's where designing for behaviors comes in. And as designers, that's beyond UI UX, guys. There is this designer that I really look up to. Her name is Monica Bielskity, and I would recommend all of you look her up. So she works a lot with these Hollywood movies, and she consults in in these spaces of science fiction and things like that. Because we were having this discussion a little bit earlier at the lunch table, that the technology of today essentially comes from the movies of yesterday, right? It's the pop culture that really shapes how our world is going to be, right? So I don't know how many people of my generation remember Minority Report. Anybody? My generation. But yeah, so that sort of movie spawned a craze of like a lot of science fiction, the gestures, but then people realize it's really not that great when you have to do it, right? But think about the science fiction movies that we still see, right? Sorry? Blade, yeah, but a lot of them are dystopian, right? Or a lot of them perpetuate the fantasies of the white male, so to say, right? How many science fiction movies really look at the future as a more equitable world, right? Where humans are actually living in harmony with aliens. When we dream of futures like that, yes. But see, that's the whole point, right? Just a few. So the popular culture has a very big role, right, to play in how we shape the world. And these are some of the things that look beyond just human-centered. So remember we spoke about UX. We need to put the human back into design. Because the first one, so I work in a space which is not a consumer space, right? Microsoft Enterprise Commerce. And I can very well say that, people who come to Microsoft, they're smart, they're intelligent. I don't think they're going to have like any mental disorders, right? Physical disorders, what? Like I don't think, how many people like that? But what I don't sort of comprehend when I'm saying that is that when I design my applications such that they are not accessible to a part of population, I am preventing those people from getting jobs that use these tools, right? So I'm impacting employability. Plurality. We talk about diversity and inclusiveness, but that's still a little bit colonial because it's still us versus them. We need to think about how everybody can come together and live in harmony, right? How do we really create equitable spaces? I think we've spoken a lot in the last 2-3 days about equality, ethics, authenticity. A great example of authenticity is when I used to design for these big corporates, right? We sort of had a unwritten rule, right? That everything has to be gray, pale shades of blue, very like a European Western palette because that was considered sophisticated. So we're sort of still, living in that thoda sa colonial era when we have so much of vibrancy of our colors. And even today, if you look at like banking websites and things like that, it's all like a washed out palette. Why? Right? So we need to bring our authenticity into our work as well. And Monica has this is unfortunately a little bit cut out, but I'll read it for you. So one of the things that she puts on her, so she has this manifesto, right, called the Protopian Manifesto. And it's really beautiful because she says that, let me figure why it's getting cut. Should work now. where she talks about from building to growing, from sustainable to regenerative. Like, don't just think about how to sustain, but think about how it can regenerate, right? From binary to fluid, where neurodiversity and disability are not a hindrance, but a source for innovation. Do you know some of our best innovation comes from accessible design? I'm guessing even this thing, right? Where ancient wisdom broadens scientific inquiry, and where narrators are shaped by a kaleidoscope of cultures and not one single prevailing dominant voice. And this is, the last one really is so true for all of us, because it's just now, probably in the last 5 or 10 years, that we are getting more and more aware of us as an authentic nation, right? Authentic group of people with our identity. My parents, for example, their aspirational values were to be, like the foreigners, right? So we sort of going back to the roots now, and the time is right, the climate is right, but then our designers need to sort of come in the front, right? And coming to the last part of it, right? So this section of the talk really got inspired from the fact that I've been working with a lot of interns and a lot of people fresh out of college, and maybe because the sort of focus given to UI UX, and in my mind, and correct me if I'm wrong, but UI UX sort of tends to be equal to proficiency in tools. There are some very, very key fundamental skills that have nothing to do with tools that we are losing out on, and which actually become hindrances to our success, right? So let's talk about them. I'll just let you have a look at this cartoon. Yeah, so the poor guy had to navigate the system and he died navigating it, right? Why do you think this has happened? And maybe not that extreme, but I think we've all had our experiences, right? Where you've tried to do things and you're like, chhod do, nahi karna hai abhi. So remember, we spoke about context. The beauty about well-crafted user experiences is that well-crafted user experiences are invisible. While a bad UX is glaringly visible, you'll not forget it, right? That also makes our job challenging as designers, right? Because when something is invisible, how do you take the credit for it? But people will notice. No one wants the products to behave badly by design. Then why so many bad experiences abound, right? Because we don't ask enough of why. So when we're starting, right, like let's say you get a design project or you get something from your boss or manager, we need to really understand what is the problem that we are trying to solve, for whom, right? Is it even the right problem to solve? So how many people know the story about 4 feet, 8.5 inches, the space shuttle and the horse's ass? Anybody in the room? Okay, so maybe this is a myth, I don't know, but I think it's a fun story. So there is like, they say that the width of the space shuttle, right, is exactly 4 feet, 8.5 inches. And it has not changed for like hundreds of years, or since whenever they started manufacturing space shuttles. The reason for that is that these space shuttles had to be transported from, I think, a facility in Illinois to a facility in Kentucky, and from there they go to NASA. And the trains, right, the width of the train that can accommodate the parts is exactly this. And why the width of the train is this? Because the width of the tracks is this. Why the width of the tracks is this? Because the tracks are made from trams, right? And trams are made from what? The ruts on the side of the road. And the measurement of that ruts from the side of the road comes from chariots that were used on these roads in Roman times. And these chariots, the width of these chariots was based on horse's ass. So after so many years, right, we're still following that spec. So Rahul and I were having a conversation over chai the other day, and he was like, why are things designed the way they are? Because, furniture, for example, heights of beds, for example, every time I get up, I bump my knee. Because it's a horse's ass. right? So, question, what are the horses as assumptions in your field? Don't take things for granted, right? As designers, we have to constantly think about the why. And that is my biggest, frustration that we don't ask enough. And sometimes why it is because we are in so much of hurry to deliver on time, deliver pretty, all of that we forget the fundamental reasons of why we became designers in the first place, right? To solve problems, guys. Use research and data to formulate and test your hypothesis. And the reason I say research and data is because they're not either or. Do people understand what this means? Correlation does not imply causation, right? There could be two events which seem like they are connected and one causes the other, but you need to dig deeper. Anybody know the story? Except you? Okay. Yeah, so what's happening here is, and don't answer, okay? What's happening here is that during World War II, the fighter jets, they were coming back to the base with bullet holes in these parts of the plane, right? And these fighter jets can be armored, but the armor is very heavy, and it sort of reduces the power of the engine. Then you have to spend more fuel, so you have to really be deliberate about where you're going to put that armor. So where do you think these guys decided to put the armor? There's a density of holes in some parts of the plane, right? Where can you, from this image, make out where they might have chosen to put the armor? Middle section, because there's a lot of holes. Anyone else? And why do you say that? So you should be a statistician, because a statistician in the Navy actually came up with this, saying that the planes that have made back with the holes that are the planes that have survived, right? So the holes that you see here are actually on the part of the plane that doesn't give way. And the holes, the missing holes, as they called it, right, were the ones that the planes never made back. So those were the parts that need to be armored. So the way to interpret data, and again, this is something that we do a lot in Microsoft, in my team, is the qual and the quant go hand in hand, right? Sometimes you do quantitative, you might do surveys, things like that, which tell you the what. But you talk to the users to understand the why. Sometimes you get the why from your small qual studies, and then you go back to figure out whether is this really a problem of that magnitude, right? So you use then a quantitative sample to validate. The second part of it, right? Shifting perspectives and reframing provokes innovation. What we just saw was an example of reframing, right? How many of you know the story of the bridge? Okay, I'm going to tell that anyways. I think it's a brilliant example of reframing. So imagine that there are these two islands, right? And you have been commissioned to build a bridge. How will you frame your problem statement? That I want to build a bridge between the two connecting whatever. Now imagine you get one more piece of information, right? And that piece of information is that there are people living on one island, right? And they need to get to work on the other island. That is why they're going to use the bridge. Now with this piece of information, do you think you can reframe the problem statement? Anybody? What problem are you going to solve? Are you going to, okay, let me ask you this. How many people in the room are going to go ahead and build the bridge? Can I have a show of hands? Okay, I see some half-hearted hands. I don't know what that means, okay? Okay, how many of you all are not going to build the bridge? Okay, I see one hand here, one hand here, one hand here, one hand here. What about the rest? Are you just going to go home or what? Okay, so now that you have this additional piece of information, right, that there are people who need to go to work from one island to the other, and the bridge is going to connect them, you could perhaps step back and reframe your problem statement. Think about, how might I get people from one island to go to the other island? Now, what has happened? Now, bridge is not the only solution, no. You could do a boat. You could build a road. Or you could step one more back and say, why do people on this one island really need to go to the other island to work? Hybrid karo na. So you see what is happening now? With every frame that we are shifting, we're redefining the problem and probably coming up with different solutions. Again, are we doing it enough? Yeah. The other day, someone was telling me about, they started to build an app for safety of passengers who travel in cabs, right? They said, let's go and let's figure out, right? We'll talk to the passengers also, we'll talk to the drivers also. And you know what is the insight they came up with? More than the passengers, the drivers are worried about their safety. They were solving the wrong problem, right? So we need to spend, and once again, reminder, right? This is not any tools. It's a process, right? It's a design process that we need to follow before we start getting to the tool part of it. Think systems, very, very important. So this is from one of my work, where we were doing this really complex ecosystem for enterprise commerce, right? How does a customer onboard with Microsoft Commerce? How do they sign agreements? And this is, see, Microsoft is a 45-year-old company, and we started by selling, these floppy disks and dabbas, PCs and all, right? And now the whole world has moved to cloud. So there's a lot of modernization that is going in, and a lot of these are legacy tools, which if we cannot shut down, because that will shut down the business of Microsoft, right? So this is about 6 to 8 months of research where we mapped out this entire ecosystem, and these hotspots are really where there's a lot of clunkiness, a lot of tools, a lot of broken processes. So what has this enabled us to do is systematically approach how we change the system one piece at a time, right, without impacting the entire ecosystem. How many of us, so going back to Don Norman's video, right, we think about the app or the mobile app or the desktop app in a silo, right, without thinking about what is upstream, what is downstream, right? So when we were talking about the train ticketing app, so there's probably like a Zomato or Swiggy out there that people are going to use because they no longer are sure that they're going to get good quality food, right, in the trains. So that's system, no? Or to reach the station, you're going to probably need to book a cab. That's also system. Now imagine, instead of just thinking about that train ticket booking app, which your manager told you to go build, you actually step back and think about the travel experience as a system. Can you imagine the kind of possibilities it will open up? Isn't that exciting? I don't know. I don't see any expressions. Yeah, but so again, think about stepping back and looking at the entire ecosystem, right? Iterate, very, very important. We talk about iterate, but you know what happens? We are in crunch of time, we have to deliver something, and see, this is the reality of the corporate world. Everything is a race against time. When do you want this design? They'll say as of yesterday, right? But this is something that we as designers have to take a stand and account for, because it's our process, right? You cannot tell, if you're getting a chair made by a carpenter and he says that, 1 week lagega, you cannot say that make it in half an hour, right? Because you respect his craft. So we also need to have that respect for our craft first, then other people will start respecting it, right? So things like, have there been multiple explorations? Have the people who live the problem been involved? Has the solutions gone through edit process? So you all do projects, right, for college. How many of you latch onto the first solution? You know, जो first दिमाग में आता है वो best है. You do? Does that work for you? So by default, you know, first 2-3 solutions you have to trash. Do we have the rigor for that? Increasingly, and I'll talk about that a little bit later in the slides, but you may have heard the term of commoditization of design, and it's not a bad thing, right? So a lot of enterprises, including Microsoft, we have component design libraries, which are building blocks, right? So when you design, you have to think about those components, because your design is really an outcome of those Lego blocks that have already been created for you, right? So are you considering those things? Are you excluding anybody? Right? A lot of times you'll see, you know, we talk accessibility and all of that, but it really becomes a checklist. As designers, are we being inclusive right from the time we put that first pixel on paper, right? Very, very important. See, I'm a researcher who's now, you know, leading research and design, but objectivity and measurement are very important if we want to up-level our craft, right? When we are idealizing, when we are conceptualizing, right? Are we thinking about what are the measures of success? Can we objectively define those measures of success? Can we figure out how to measure it? And then can we design back from it, right? Because have you heard about the concept of moments of truth in customer experience? So every, like, you know, suppose you go to a restaurant, right? Every moment that you spend in the restaurant will not be an exceptional experience, right? Because that's not even sustainable for the business. So there have to be these 2, 3, 4 well-chosen points which really are unnegotiable. You know? That is what this will help you do, right? It will help you scope what are the things that you would rather, you know, put your head on the sword and die for rather than compromise. But it cannot be for everything, no? And this also is a great way, by the way, to align your business stakeholders with what you're driving via your design. Finally, this is what I tell my team, and I'd love to leave you with this message, that we are not researchers, we are not designers, we are product makers at the end of the day. So our research can be great, out of the world, designs can be great, out of the world, but if it doesn't see the light of the day, right, it's as good as not happening, no? So I promised a checklist, here it is. Think of your product in context of your organization. Think what you can do to help your organization succeed in helping customers succeed. So design cannot be different from business goals. Think about how it comes together. Take accountability for what is being built or not. As you grow, as you go out, you will see that very often, you know, you have that feeling in your body that this is not right. Do not ignore it. Speak up. Because at some point, someone will speak up and then they will ask you, why didn't you say that? Own your failures. Every failure is a learning, and own it up. You know, we talk about design being given a seat at the table, right? But you cannot have that seat unless you own up the failures or success, right? You cannot be the safe player. You'll be like, I've done my job, now you go figure it out. Then you're never really going to be able to use that seat at the table. And finally, the last point is what most of us, me included, have learned very late in life, is stakeholder maps and learning how to influence and which stories to tell whom, so that you create that energy that everybody wants to dream the dream that you are dreaming, right? To make your product into a reality. Where does that leave UI UX? So this is where we are. I think we've heard enough over the last 2-3 days about how a lot of things are getting automated. You have design systems, you have no code, low code, you have AI powered, right? What does that mean for us as designers? Is that these tools liberate the designers to do what we're supposed to do, which is to solve problems, right? If we are leveraging this technology, we are saving time, we are saving effort, and we can focus on things that really matter, right? Problems that need human intervention, that need human thought process. This is a report from The Value of Design by McKinsey in 2018 or 2019, I think, where they talk about what design leadership lacks. And there are two things. One is clarity, which is fewer than half of design leaders feel that CEOs fully understand their role, and only a third of CEOs in the direct reports can state confidently what is head of design for. I think this is a fabulous opportunity because no one really knows what a designer is supposed to do. So you can really do everything that you want and more, right? The other, though, is a little bit worrisome. Only 1 in 10 CEOs says that their senior designer plays a meaningful role in strategy development. And only 1 in 6 design leaders believe that they are positioned to deliver value for their company. This is where we come in. But if we are trapped in tools, someone else will do it, right? So think about all of these things beyond the tools, beyond UI, UX. There's much to do. Let's use our craft to leave this world a better place. And I'm going to end with a plug. This is an organization that I'm part of. It's called the HCI Professionals Association of India. The website is india.hci.org, and this is really a platform for the HCI community in India to come together. We do a lot of conferences, local events, all of that. Do look this up, do sign up, and be a part of this movement, yeah? And with that, thank you.